The adoption of the treaty is an extremely hopeful and positive development, but it comes at a time of extraordinarily increased risk that these weapons will actually be used. And that is what we really need to focus on moving forward. I believe, as many people have said, that at this moment, the risk of nuclear war is greater than it has been at any moment since the height of the Cold War. It is possibly greater. There are at least 7 reasons why this danger is increased, and I want to go through them briefly with you. 4 of them relate to geopolitical flashpoints. 3 of them are other kinds of considerations. First, there is increased hostility, tension between the United States and Russia. Relations between these countries are the worst they've been in 30 years. We were told for decades we didn't need to worry about this particular conflict anymore. Clearly that's not true. Both sides are brandishing their nuclear weapons in ways that we never thought we would see again. Relations between the United States and China are the worst they've been in 40 years. And the growing tension between these countries now comes with its own set of specific potential geographic flashpoints in the South China Sea, where the US and Chinese navies routinely play chicken with each other. Ships kind of buzzing each other to see who's going to back off first. A situation which is very fraught with danger and could lead to conflict, potentially to nuclear conflict. The situation in North Korea is the one which is receiving perhaps the most attention at the moment, and the danger there has just taken a huge step in the wrong direction with the appointment this week of a new national security advisor in Washington who appears committed to bringing about a military intervention by the United States in Korea. The 4th of the geopolitical factors which increase the danger of nuclear war, of course, relates to the situation here in South Asia, which several people have spoken to already. Let me just say that I personally think that the danger here in South Asia is on a par with the danger in Korea. I think we could experience the escalation of the low-level fighting that takes place daily in Kashmir at any time, and none of us would be surprised. We could also have another terrorist episode like the Mumbai hotel disaster in 2008, which could itself serve as a trigger for conflict between India and Pakistan. So those 4 geopolitical flashpoints have all, in recent years, increased the danger that we will have a nuclear war. There are 3 other factors. First, there is the danger increasing at this time of cyber terrorism. We used to think that the most dangerous thing that a terrorist could do was to get hold of a nuclear weapon and blow up a city, New York, or Tel Aviv, or Moscow, or Delhi. We now understand there is a greater danger. Terrorists potentially could carry out a cyber attack on the command and control centers of a nuclear power and either cause that country's weapons to be launched against potential adversaries, or perhaps more likely create a false alert under which the country that was hacked believed that it was being attacked by another side with nuclear weapons and responded in kind. Next, there's the situation created by progressive climate change. The nuclear weapon states, in delaying their fulfillment of their obligations to eliminate their arsenals, frequently say they do want nuclear disarmament, but not now, at some point in the future when the world is safer. Unfortunately, because of climate change, the world is not becoming safer. It is daily becoming a more dangerous place, as large parts of the planet become increasingly unable to sustain the populations which live there now. And as this process continues, and it will, even if we take all the steps that we should to limit climate change, as this process proceeds, there will be conflict and forced migration on a scale that is unprecedented in human history. And if nuclear weapons are still around when this takes place, the chance they will be used will grow and grow and grow. And finally, of a more short-term duration, there is the problem created by the Trump presidency. This is an unprecedented event in the nuclear era, and I don't think we can ignore it. The United States has argued for 3 decades that it would be an unacceptable disaster if a single nuclear weapon fell into the wrong hands, by which it meant a terrorist state or a rogue nation. The United States has now turned over 6,800 nuclear warheads. to a man who is judged by the security experts in his own party to lack the judgment, the temperament, and the knowledge base to command this arsenal. And we are living as a result of this in an extraordinarily dangerous moment. So, if the danger of nuclear war is growing, it is imperative that we understand fully what will happen if these weapons are used. This was the basis of our argumentation for the ban treaty, and it will be the basis, I think, of our efforts going forward, not only to bring the ban treaty into force, but to get the states which possess nuclear weapons to join this process and actually begin to dismantle these weapons once and for all. I want to talk to you briefly today about what these humanitarian consequences would be. I suspect that many of you in the audience know this information. For some of you, it may be new. For those who have already heard this information, I think it's fully worth hearing it again, frankly, because it's information which we tend to actively forget. We push it out of our minds because it is so uncomfortable. But we do that at great peril, because unless we confront the reality of what these weapons are going to do, we are not going to summon the energy to make our governments listen to us and change their nuclear policies. So let me start by talking a little bit about a limited nuclear war. And the scenario that we have looked at relates specifically to the situation here in South Asia. We have done a number of studies over the last decade based on a scenario in which India and Pakistan each use 50 nuclear warheads against industrial urban targets in the other country. For the purposes of this study, we assume that these were weapons about the size of the Hiroshima bomb. Now, it turns out this is probably a grave underestimate of what will actually happen if there's a nuclear war between India and Pakistan, because both countries now have close to 130 nuclear warheads. In the case of India, at least, many of these warheads are 3 times more powerful than the bombs we used in our scenario. But it gives an idea of the enormity of the problem that we're facing. As a direct result of this war, 20 million people would die in the first week from the explosions, from the fires, and from the direct radiation effects. 20 million people dead in a week. But that is only a small part of the destruction that this war would cause, because these 100 warheads detonated over cities would start 100 firestorms that would loft more than 6 million tons of soot into the upper atmosphere. They would block out the sun and cause climate disruption across the entire planet, and a subsequent catastrophic decline in food production that would trigger a worldwide famine that we have estimated could put up to 2 billion people at risk of starvation. The death of 2 billion people over the course of the decade would be an event unprecedented in human history. It would not mean the biological extinction of our species. It would mean the end of civilization as we know it. No civilization in all of history has ever withstood a shock of this magnitude, and there is no reason to believe that the complex and fragile economic system which we all depend on would survive the disruption of this sort. This is what could happen from a limited nuclear war, here in South Asia or elsewhere on the planet. A large-scale war between the United States and Russia would be far worse. And I want to describe to you first, in discussing this threat, what a large-scale attack on a single city would look like. All of us have images in our mind of the destruction at Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And those events were a powerful warning, which we need to heed. But the main thing we need to know about Hiroshima and Nagasaki is that they do not begin to prepare us for the level of destruction that will take place with the use of modern nuclear weapons. A war between Russia and the United States would not involve one city or 2 cities attacked with 1 or 2 small bombs. It would involve many cities attacked with large numbers of weapons, much larger than the Hiroshima bomb. We don't know the exact targeting strategy of the United States or Russia, but it is widely believed that a major city like New York or Moscow would be targeted with at least 15 to 20 nuclear weapons, each 30 to 50 times more powerful than the Hiroshima device. I'm actually going to use the model of a single 20 megaton explosion. We expect that the megatonnage directed at Washington, New York, London, Moscow would be less than this. The destruction would actually be substantially greater than I'm going to describe because you cause more damage if you have multiple weapons spread out over a large area. But this model, I think, gives us an adequate approximation of what would happen. Within 1,000th of a second of the detonation of this bomb, a fireball would form reaching out for 3 kilometers in every direction. Within this area, the temperature would rise to 20 million degrees, and everything would be vaporized. The buildings, the trees, the people, the upper level of the earth itself would disappear. To a distance of 6 kilometers in every direction, the explosion would generate winds greater than 1,000 kilometers per hour. Mechanical forces of that magnitude destroy anything that human beings can build. Underground shelters collapse when they're exposed to this kind of mechanical force. To a distance of 9 kilometers in every direction, the heat would be so intense that automobiles would melt. And to a distance of 25 kilometers in every direction, the heat would be so intense that everything flammable would burn. Paper, cloth, wood, heating oil, gasoline, it would all ignite. Hundreds of thousands of fires, which over the next half hour would coalesce into a firestorm, 50 kilometers across. Within this entire area, the temperature would rise to 800 degrees centigrade. All of the oxygen would be consumed, and every living thing would die. In the case of Moscow, we're talking about 10 or 12 million people. In the case of New York, something like 15 million people. And if this were part of a large-scale war between the United States and Russia, this level of destruction would be visited on every major city in both countries. And if NATO were drawn into the conflict, most of the great cities of Canada and Europe would also be destroyed in this way. All told, perhaps 300 to 500 million people dead in a half an hour. But that's only part of the story. A limited war here in South Asia put 6 million tons of soot into the upper atmosphere. A large-scale war between the United States and Russia puts 150 million tons of soot into the upper atmosphere. And that causes an even more profound climate disruption. Temperatures across the planet fall an average of 8 degrees centigrade. In the interior regions of Eurasia and North America, the temperatures drop by 25 to 30 degrees centigrade. We essentially create a new ice age in the course of 3 days. We produce conditions that have not been seen on this planet in 18,000 years, since the coldest moment of the last natural ice age. And under these conditions, all of the ecosystems which have evolved during the last 12,000 temperate years would collapse. Food production across the planet would stop. The vast majority of the human race would starve to death. And under these conditions, it is possible that we would become extinct as a species. Now, this is not some nightmare abstract scenario cooked up to be the plot of a Hollywood movie. This is the danger that we are living with every single day that these weapons continue to exist. We are living on borrowed time. Even if no nuclear-armed state chooses to launch a nuclear war, it can happen by accident. We know of at least 6 occasions when either Moscow or Washington prepared to launch their nuclear weapons in the mistaken belief that the other side had already done so. And on each of these occasions, we were saved from nuclear destruction only by good luck. It is essentially the policy of all of the nuclear weapon states today that we hope our luck will last. This is not a policy. This is madness. Our luck will not last. At some point, it will give out. And the horrible things that I've described will happen. But this is not the future that must be. If we take action, we can prevent this from happening. And the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons shows an important path forward. We need to bring that treaty into force. More importantly, we need to bring the countries which have not signed the treaty because they possess nuclear weapons into this process, especially in the democratic societies which possess nuclear weapons, like India. We need to build a mass movement of people who understand what is at stake and will work to make their government change policy and do the right thing. This is not an impossible task. The people of the world have done this once before. In the early 1980s, we were headed towards nuclear war between the Soviet Union and the United States, and a mass movement was built involving millions of people across the planet, and we changed the fundamental policies of the United States and the Soviet Union. We ended the Cold War arms race, and I believe we saved the world. That's what we need to do again, and it's something which we can do. When we think about this, there is an enormous weight on our shoulders. There is an incredible responsibility which we who understand what is at stake bear, because we have a responsibility to take action. But this is also an extraordinary gift which we all have. Every one of us wants to do good in our life. We have been given the opportunity to save the world, and there is nothing better than anyone can ever do. And we need to seize that opportunity. We need to create the political will that will force the governments of the world to possess nuclear weapons to get rid of these terrible implements of destruction. They are not a force of nature. They are not an act of God. We built them with our hands, and we know how to take them apart. All that's missing is the political will, and that's where we come in. That's what we must do. The people of the world come from many different spiritual traditions. I was raised in the Jewish faith, and in our Bible, it is reported that God said, "Behold, I have set before you life and death. Therefore choose life, that you and your children might live." That is literally the choice before all of humanity today. And so whatever our faith background might be, let us all pray that we will choose wisely and that we will act with courage and determination so that indeed our children might live.